It was supposed to be the honeymoon of a lifetime, a love story that seemed like it was written as a fairy tale. We are on our way on this episode of Between the Dates to Huntington, West Virginia to find the final resting place of Mary Eloise Smith. What did Mary Eloise Smith do? What was she famous for? She actually survived the sinking of the Titanic, and as a grave visitor and someone who does what I do on my channel, it's not easy to find someone that survived the Titanic, but we have today, and we're heading that way. Also going to have a special stop, or maybe a couple special stops along the way. We are going to visit the grave of Mary Eloise Smith, survivor of the Titanic. And you know, as we're on our way to visit the final resting place of Mary Eloise Smith, there is yet again a threat of rain in the air. I'm telling you, these Between the Dates, like I said a couple episodes ago, it should be called Between the Showers. So I don't know what we'll run into at the cemetery, but I'm looking forward to finding it. So let's go. Let's head on up to Huntington, West Virginia.
We've all seen grave markers and headstones, and normally they have two dates: birth and death, beginning and end. The events that occur between the dates tell the real story. Me, along with my team, bring you the stories, revelations, and history of what happens between the dates.
You know, tradition back in the day, these young ladies, when they would become women, would have what they would call like coming out parties, where they would be introduced into society as a lady. And these were big events, and Mary Eloise Smith, coming from a highly thought of political family, she was part of the Vinson political family. She had one of these parties, and she caught the eye of Lucian Smith. That's where the surname Smith comes from. That's a married surname. She caught the eye of Lucian Smith, and it wasn't long before Lucian came calling to West Virginia, to Huntington, and their wedding was a short courtship. Their wedding was said to be like one of the events of the decade. People came from far and near, and it was supposed to have been just an absolutely beautiful wedding. They took what was supposed to be a dream honeymoon, traveling through Europe. Well, it was said that, we're talking maybe a 3-month trip. It was said that she was with child, and they decided to cut the trip a little short and decided to come home. Well, there's a few different options, but one option was a ticket aboard the RMS Titanic. And that is the route they chose to take home. And my goodness, what history, what fateful history was awaiting them on the last night of their own journey. Well, we've not made it to the cemetery yet, but I did want to stop off to the side of the road here. We were in Canova, West Virginia, and even though this stretch of road now dead ends and there's really nothing on down the road, still got to be careful because people may come up here to this site. I'm going to take you all to a place that holds a very important part, sad part, special part of West Virginia history. So let's go look at it together. How many of you out there saw the movie We Are Marshall? Well, that was actually based on real events. So on the way to the cemetery, I wanted to stop off at the Marshall plane crash site and show you all where this tragedy went down. You can see here the memorial. They've got the American flag and the Marshall flag. Marshall plane crash site. On November 14th, 1970, 75 people died in the worst sports-related air tragedy in U.S. history when a Southern Airways DC-9 crashed into the hillside nearby. The victims included 36 Marshall University football players, 9 coaches and administrators, 25 fans, and the air crew of 5. No one survived this horrific disaster. And they got this little deck here that you can come out on. And you can see some of the memorials left here. You can see right here spelled out in pennies, we are Marshall. And where it's springtime and the trees and the leaves are all out here, you can't see as well over in there, but right over in there is where the plane went down. And if you've never watched that movie, We Are Marshall, I would highly suggest watching it. And here's the thing, they were on their way back and they were almost home, because Tri-State Airport just is right over on the other side of that hill, not too far from here at all. And I mean, it's always a sad situation, but it makes it even sadder because I mean they were almost there, almost made it home, but this is the site where that happened. And Marshall University is in Huntington, and the Tri-State Airport serves the Huntington area. And Marshall University is not that far from here. It's just right down the road. So while we're here and while we're on our way to the cemetery, just want to pause and pay our respects to all those lives lost and take you all along with me. I'm curious as to if anyone out there either remembers the Marshall plane crash or has ever heard of the Marshall plane crash, but this is where it happened. Very, very sad story, very important part. As most of you know, I live in Kentucky. I live in a tri-state, Kentucky, Ohio, and West Virginia, so this is part of the tri-state area that I live in. Very important part of history here in the tri-state. And I'm just curious, and I know the movie, it's probably been 10 years ago now, maybe longer than that, 10, 15 years that movie came out, but it brought shed a lot more light on the tragedy here that happened. I'm just wondering out there, that you can let me know in the comments if any of you all ever heard of the Marshall plane crash. But we're continuing to make our way to the cemetery, to the final resting place of Mary Eloise Smith, the Titanic survivor from West Virginia. We have made it to Spring Hill Cemetery in Huntington, West Virginia. This is the cemetery that we will find the grave of Mary Eloise Hughes Smith, the person we are here to visit today. But since I took you all to see the Marshall plane crash site, there is a beautiful memorial, and some of those victims of the plane crash are actually buried in here. But there's a beautiful memorial, so I wanted to come here, pay our respects, and visit this, show you all this since we went to the crash site. They shall live on in the hearts of their families and friends forever, and this memorial records their loss to the university and to the community. And then you'll find the names. Of all those lost members of the football team right here. And lasting remembrance of the members of the Marshall University football team, the coaches, staff, and devoted fans who died in the plane crash November 14th, 1970. alumni and friends, staff members. It's said that some of these graves here are some of those that perished. So yeah, it's a beautiful memorial. Very sad story, but a beautiful memorial. Okay, so a few things I want to go over before we make our way over to Mary Eloise's grave. Now, different records show different names. Mary Eloise Smith, Eloise Mary Smith, Mary Eloise Hughes Smith. It's all the same person. She was just known by different names throughout her life. She was part of, her maiden name was Hughes. Her mother was a Vinson. The Vinson family was very well connected in West Virginia politics, which is why they had such a big name around here in these parts in those times. So just wanted to keep that in mind while we go over here and look for her grave and pay our respects to a Titanic survivor. Can you all believe that? Here in West Virginia, who would have thought? Well, you can see here, just by looking, very old and very historic. And if you hear lawn equipment in the background, apparently it is mowing day and weed eating day, and we'll do our best to get around that. We're walking down to the grave of Mary Eloise Smith, and like I mentioned, she was born a Hughes, married Lucian Smith, and this was she was part of a very connected family. So you know, her being on the Titanic, I'm sure it was not a third-class ticket. And here is the final resting place of Eloise Hughes Smith, is what is on the stone. Mary Eloise Smith, survivor of the Titanic. Now, there's a few other things I'm going to tell you all while we're up here about her and her life. Now, these plots, actually, a lot of those are from the Vinson family that I was telling you about. The big marker there, the back side of it says Vinson. There's several Vinsons over there, but she was born a Hughes. Her mother, you can see right here, was a Vinson. When it came time for the rescue boats to start taking people out into the water as the ship sank, she would plead with those loading the boats to let her husband Lucian come with her. Women and children first. Women and children first is what she kept being told over and over. Now, her husband, being a very, very good man from everything I can tell, was trying to comfort her and downplay the situation, telling her there's plenty of lifeboats on here for everyone, and I'll be saved and we'll meet back up. Never happened. He was lost. He passed in the Titanic tragedy. Now, in another nod to history, there was a man that had survived that comforted Mary while she was being rescued. I don't know if he was on a lifeboat. I don't know how he ended up there. Word says he was actually in the water and somebody pulled him out. I don't know. It being so cold, that may have just been, something that was fictionalized. But anyway, they met up, were together on the dock where they were rescued after the Carpathia rescued them. And it said that he carried her to her father, who had come to pick her up. Now, here is where things get interesting. They kept a relationship, those two, her and the other survivor. I believe his name was Robert Daniel, if I'm not mistaken. They kept a relationship, and years later they got married. So it's probably the only time the two Titanic survivors would have gotten married. The marriage didn't last long, and actually Eloise was married a few other times, which is interesting that that Smith would be on her stone, because I know she was married a few times after that, and that was Lucian's name. So there must have definitely been some care and some true love there, which makes the tragedy even worse. But she passed away in 1940 in Cincinnati, Ohio, and it was said that she passed away in a sanitarium. I looked up the sanitarium. The only sanitarium I could find at that time in Cincinnati was a mental sanitarium. So I don't know if she, in her later years, because she didn't live to be very old, but her later life, I should say, I don't know if she suffered from mental trauma. I mean, why wouldn't she? Everything she had been through. But I mentioned at the beginning of the video that they cut their trip short because it was believed that she was pregnant. After she got back, a little while later, she gave birth to her son, Philip Lucian Smith Jr., I believe was the name. So it was true. She was with child, and that's what cut the trip short. So who would have thought that in Huntington, West Virginia, you would have a grave of a Titanic survivor? But we sure enough do. And you know, she had the birth year, death year, birth date, death date. My goodness, what happened between those dates was a story for the ages. And my goodness, what a story. I mean, we are leaving the grave of Mary Eloise Smith, but what a story. I mean, my goodness. And like I mentioned on this channel, in this series, between the dates, I mean, you got the birth date, you got the death date, but what really matters is what happens between those dates. And can you imagine, I mean, being on your honeymoon, time of your life, a 3-month trip, finding out you're pregnant, so deciding, hey, we probably need to go home, and you book aboard the Titanic. I mean, what, you talk about just a rendezvous with history. My goodness. I mean, just think about that. And then to pass the way she did in the sanitarium, just a sad story, an amazing story. I mean, it's amazing how all that, the timing, just think about the timing of that. Man, your wedding, your honeymoon, the birth of your child, finding out you're pregnant, and then being on board the Titanic, and then marrying someone who was on board the Titanic even afterwards. My goodness, what a story. Mary Eloise Smith had a lot going on in a short period of time between those dates. You can see here as I've kind of panned around, this is a beautiful cemetery. I'm so glad to be here, so glad to bring you this sad but very intriguing story from Spring Hill Cemetery in Huntington, West Virginia. I will see you again soon.
We've all seen grave markers and headstones, and normally they have 2 dates, birth and death, beginning and end. The events that occur between the dates tell the real story. Me, along with my team, bring you the stories, revelations, and history of what happens between the dates.